Now turn to Section 1.
You will hear a conversation between an IELTS candidate and an IELTS administrator. Look at the questions 1 to 5. Listen to the first part of the conversation and answer questions 1 to 5.
Good afternoon. I'm applying for a master's program at the University of Exeter in the UK. I'm planning to register for the IELTS exam at your centre next month. I have some questions I'd like to ask you before I register, if that's okay.
Certainly. Would you be taking the academic module?
I think so, but I'll have to contact the university just to make sure.
You'll probably need the academic because most universities don't accept the general training. And anyway, the procedures to register for the exam are the same for both the general and the academic modules.
Good. My first question is whether I sit all parts of the exam on the same day. I don't live here, you see, and for me it would be more convenient to do all the papers on the same day.
Unfortunately, the speaking part is scheduled for Thursdays, and reading, writing and listening tests take place on Saturdays. We can't change the days, I'm afraid.
That's a pity. Well, never mind. What sort of documents do I need to bring in order to register?
You'll have to fill in the IELTS application form and bring an ID, a copy of your ID, and 2 passport-size photos on a white background.
Will any ID do?
We only accept original passports and national IDs.
That's good to know. Did you say that reading, writing and listening are scheduled for Saturday?
That's right.
Will I get a break in between the papers?
I'm afraid there aren't any breaks between the papers. Each paper takes an hour to complete, so it's 3 hours straight through. You'll first do listening and then reading, followed by the writing test. This is a standard requirement from Cambridge.
Now look at the questions 6 to 10. As the conversation continues, complete questions 6 to 10.
Okay, and how soon after the test can I pick up my results?
It takes 13 calendar days for the results to be processed.
Can you let me know how much it is and the form of payment?
The examination fee is $200. You can pay by credit or debit card. We also accept checks. We only accept cash as a form of payment in exceptional circumstances.
And one last question. Can I mail you the application documents?
Certainly. You can send all the documents by registered mail to our address, 47 Clover Place, New Rochelle, New York.
Could you spell New Rochelle for me, please?
Certainly. Newrochle.
Could I have the zip code as well?
Sure. Our zip code is 10806.
Thanks.
You can also email us at inquiry@examsmail.com or phone us at 325-9082.
I think that's all. Thank you very much for all the information. Bye.
You're welcome. Goodbye.
That is end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Section 2. You are going to hear a radio interview about giving up smoking. First, look at questions 11 to 13. As you listen to the first part of the interview, answer questions 11 to 13. For these questions, there are 4 alternatives: A, B, C, and D. Decide which alternative is the most suitable answer and circle the correct letter.
And now, let's hear what Mr. Gold has to say about kicking the habit of smoking. It was connected with wanting to change your life and your desire to become an actor. Is that right, Mr. Gold?
Yes.
So, can you tell our listeners a bit more about how you managed to give up?
Well, I enrolled on a variety of evening courses where I found I wasn't able to do the warm-up sessions. Bending down to touch my toes made me breathless. Even though I hated to admit it, the problem wasn't so much my sitting around all the time, but my 15 to 20 a day smoking habit. If I'd been able to limit myself to 3 or 4 cigarettes a day, there'd have been no problem, but I was seriously addicted. And I'm talking about waking up at 3 a.m. dying for a cigarette, or, in the days before 24-hour shopping, driving across London at night to buy a packet of cigarettes when I ran out. But above all, my addiction meant making sure I never ran out, at the expense of everything else, including necessities.
So, what did you do?
The thought of all my past attempts to give up just wouldn't go away. This was something that had constantly been on my mind, especially first thing in the morning with the chest pains, coughing fits and headaches, not to mention the frequent colds and throat infections. But I couldn't imagine life without smoking. I also enjoyed my life, but the thing I longed for most was to escape the trap of a job I was bored with. I knew what I wanted, and I understood something else too. This time, I was going to keep my little plan a secret.
Now look at questions 14 to 20. As the interview continues,
Now listen carefully and answer questions 14 to 20.
On the 1st of July, I managed to get through 24 hours without a single cigarette. The next day, I got to 48 hours. Then I aimed for 100, 500, 1,000. Easy. It was my own little private game, and I was winning it. If anyone mentioned they hadn't seen me smoking, I simply said I was cutting down. I had to be sure of success. Eventually, a month passed, and I felt safe enough to come out. I'd lost count of the number of hours I'd gone without a cigarette. All I suffered was a couple of bad headaches, and then I was set for my most healthy year ever. Not one single cold for over 12 months. I now realize that the secret of my success was to look upon this as an exciting adventure, a way of helping me to become an actor. And because nobody knew what I was up to, I never once feared the accusation of having no willpower if I failed. With the right attitude, the whole thing turned out to be a lot easier than expected. I finally did get into much better physical shape, go to drama school, and become a professional actor.
Very interesting indeed. I'm sure we all wish we had Mr. Gold's determination. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Gold. And I hope our listeners will learn from the experience you and our other guests have talked to us about today, and perhaps find their own road to success.
That's the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Section 3. You are going to listen to a radio program on sleep deprivation.
Now look at the questions 21 to 25.
Now listen to the first part of the program and answer questions
21 to 25.
With us in the studio today are Dr. Peter Collins, a senior lecturer in the Department of Psychology at the University of Chicago, and Helen Gardner, the author of the book Deep Sleep. They've come to our studio to discuss the effects of sleep deprivation and also give some tips to the sleep deprived on how to deal with the problem. Welcome to the studio, Helen and Peter. Now, Peter, what are the reasons for sleep deprivation and how can it affect our lives?
Well, the research into sleep deprivation started in the late 50s and has been going on ever since. Many researchers link sleep deprivation with electricity, television and computers, which have enabled humans to work 24/7. Before electricity was invented, people's body clocks were synchronized with the sun's schedule, and the average time they spent sleeping was 8 to 9 hours a night. By 1975, that average was down to 7 hours, and today 1/3 of us sleep less than 6 hours a day. This leads to a condition called chronic sleep deprivation, which basically means going for extended periods of time with less sleep than your body needs. Chronic sleep deprivation can cause a variety of physical and psychological problems. At its most basic level, loss of sleep can make us more irritable and less efficient, and can affect long-term memory and concentration, which can result in more accidents. According to the latest research into sleep deprivation is the main reason for 3% of plane crashes, 10% of domestic accidents, 20% of accidents at work, and 45% of all traffic accidents. Research into the physical effects of chronic sleep deprivation suggests more serious and significant long-term complications. Research from my university, the University of Chicago, has shown that sleep deprivation interferes with how the human body regulates insulin and sugar metabolism, which can increase the risk of diabetes. People who are sleep deprived have weakened immune systems and are more prone to viruses and other kinds of infections. People who don't get enough sleep have cognitive problems or difficulties processing and assimilating new information. Lack of sleep affects long-term memory, and slows down such abilities as judgment and reaction times. Some researchers link sleep deprivation with obesity, indicating that sleep disorders and eating disorders are often linked.
Now look at the questions 26 to 30.
As the program continues, answer questions
26 to 30.
Helen, you've done a fair amount of research for your recent book on helping people deal with sleeping problems. Could you give our listeners some tips on managing their sleep?
Well, if you spend several hours a night tossing and turning in bed, trying to fall asleep, you first have to find out how much sleep you need. To do so, you'll need to try and sleep 6 to 9 hours a night. Set aside 3 days for the experiment. It's best to do it on a long weekend or a holiday to ensure it doesn't get interrupted. During the experiment, you should go to bed at the same time every night and give yourself 6, 7, 8 or 9 hours of sleep. Then monitor the way you feel throughout the day to find out how many hours of sleep you need in order to feel your best. Once you find out how much sleep you need, you can work on improving the quality of your sleep. The main secret here is to allow yourself 1 or 2 hours to relax before going to bed. You may want to try and have a warm shower or bath before going to bed. Doing some quiet activities such as reading or filing can help some people relax. A warm drink in bed helps to induce sleepiness. Some people take up yoga or meditation to help them relax at night. Different techniques will work for different people, so it's best to experiment and find the one that suits you best. You should definitely avoid using technology before going to bed. Activities such as playing video games, watching TV, and others which require you to use your attention can stop you from falling asleep. Avoid eating before going to bed. A late dinner can disrupt your sleep. Not only is going to bed with a heavy stomach bad for digestion and can make you overweight, but it can also keep you awake for hours. Caffeine-rich drinks can increase your heart rate, which can stop you from falling asleep. Energy drinks also have the same effect on your body. You should avoid drinking these at night. The same goes for vigorous physical exercise, such as weightlifting or working out on a treadmill. In many cases, you can reset your body clock and make it tick for you by changing your lifestyle. If your sleep deprivation is severe, it's always best to seek professional advice and get an appointment with your doctor, who might prescribe you sleeping pills.
Thank you, Helen. We'll be back after the break and we'll be answering questions we've received from our listeners.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answer.
Now turn to Section 4. Section 4. You will hear a lecture on the production and trade of rice. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40. Good morning and welcome to our inaugural lecture on agricultural economics. Today's topic is the world's production and trade of rice. As you are all well aware, rice is the staple ingredient in the diet of much of the world's population. Its importance as a food cereal in the human diet cannot be underestimated. In fact, it's a close second to wheat. About 560 million metric tons of rice is grown each year, compared with about 600 million metric tons of wheat. Coarse grains, such as corn, sorghum, barley, oats, rye, and millet, mostly go into animal feed, which, by the way, is seen by many as a wasteful and inefficient use of fertile land, because around 4 kilos of grain is needed to produce about half a kilo of beef. Some 900 million metric tons of coarse grains are grown annually worldwide, and a further 300 million metric tons of grain is produced for the oil in its seeds. Now, I'll return to the subject of rice production. What do we know about rice production? Well, firstly, rice produces more food energy per hectare than any other cereal grain, and almost as much protein per hectare as wheat. Secondly, the production of rice has more than doubled in the last 40 years. How has this increase in production come about? Mainly as a result of improved field yields. The actual land area planted in rice has only risen by about 30%. As you know, rice is primarily grown in flooded fields, and therefore cultivation area is restricted by the sort of soil and the availability of water. Although rice can be grown on dry land, it is essentially after all a type of grass. The yields and quality in this case are much lower, and other grasses and weeds can easily overtake the rice. As yet there are no herbicides that can selectively kill other grass types without killing the rice. Much of the world's rice is still grown and cultivated by hand, because for mechanized farming, the land must be able to be drained and hold heavy equipment. Of the total rice production, it's no surprise to learn that the greatest proportion by far is grown and consumed in Asia. You will see from the chart that the leading producers of rice are China at around 39%, followed by India with a quarter of the total. Indonesia produces almost 1/10, and other countries like Bangladesh, Vietnam, Thailand, Japan and Brazil grow another 25, almost 26% of the total. As I said before, most rice is consumed in the countries where it is grown. That means that very little rice is actually traded, and for this reason, the market price is very volatile. That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Give it to me.